The air inside the VIP lounge of the Obsidian Room was usually cold, kept that way, to preserve the expensive scotch and the tempers of the dangerous men who drank it. But the moment the waitress answered her phone, the temperature didn't just drop, it froze. One sentence. That was all it took. She spoke 6 words into the receiver, not in English, not even in standard Italian, but in a specific jagged dialect of Sicilian that hadn't been heard in New York since the late 90s. Lorenzo Moretti, the man they called Il Lupo. The wolf stopped his glass halfway to his mouth. The entire room went silent. As she panicked and turned to the door, Lorenzo didn't yell. He simply whispered to his heavy, "Don't let her leave." New York City's meatpacking district was a facade. On the surface, it was cobblestone streets, overpriced brunch spots, and tourists taking photos of the High Line. But 3 stories beneath the pavement, under a nondescript textile factory, lay the Obsidian Room. It was the kind of place that didn't appear on Google Maps. You didn't get a reservation. You got summoned. Emily Russo adjusted the collar of her uniform. It was stiff, uncomfortable, and intentionally nondescript, a simple black vest over a white, crisp shirt. She was 24, with dark hair pulled back into a severe bun that made her look older, stricter. She kept her head down. That was the first rule of working at the Obsidian Be Invisible. Table 4 needs a refill on the 42 Don Julio. The floor manager, a sweaty man named Gary, who smelled perpetually of mints and nervous sweat, hissed into her ear. "And for God's sake, don't look at them, just pour." Emily nodded, gripping the heavy crystal decanter. Her hands were steady, a skill she had mastered over years of hiding in plain sight. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a ghost in a city of loud noises. She had been working here for 6 months, sending money back to a nondescript P.O. box in Providence, keeping her head low, pretending she was just Emily from Queens who dropped out of art school. She approached table 4. The atmosphere around the booth was suffocating. 4 men sat there, but only one mattered. He sat in the center, leaning back against the velvet banquette with the lethargic grace of a predator that had already eaten. Lorenzo Moretti. At 32, Lorenzo was the youngest Don in the history of the 5 families. The papers called him a shipping magnate and a philanthropist. But down here in the dark, he was Il Lupo. He wore a bespoke suit cut from midnight blue wool, likely tailored on Savile Row, and he wore it with an indifference that screamed old money. His eyes were the color of burnt espresso, dark and unreadable, scanning the room not with paranoia, but with boredom. To his right sat Marco the Butcher Vanzini, a man whose nickname was unfortunately literal. To his left was his consigliere, an older man named Stefano, with silver hair and a face carved from granite. Emily stepped up to the table. She felt the vibration of their conversation in her chest before she heard the words. They were speaking low, their voices a rumble of baritone threats. "The shipment at the port of Newark is stalled," Marco was saying, his voice a gravelly whine. "The union rep is asking for another 10%. I say we send him a message, a loud one." Lorenzo swirled the amber liquid in his glass. He didn't look at Marco. He didn't look at the table. He looked straight ahead at the empty space where the air conditioner hummed. "Loud messages are for children, Marco," Lorenzo said. His voice was smooth, devoid of the rough New York accent his associates carried. It was a transatlantic drawl polished at Swiss boarding schools. "We don't make noise. We make silence. Pay him the 10%. Then when the shipment clears, fire him. Legally." Make sure he never works on the eastern seaboard again. That hurts longer than a broken leg." Emily moved in, pouring the tequila into Marco's glass. She was careful, precise. "More tequila, signore?" she asked softly, keeping her eyes fixed on the tablecloth. Lorenzo's hand paused on the stem of his glass. For a split second, his gaze flicked to her hand. She wore no jewelry, no nail polish. Just clean, raw skin. "Leave the bottle," Lorenzo said. He didn't look at her face. He dismissed her with a slight wave of his index finger. Emily exhaled a breath she didn't know she was holding and backed away. Being near Lorenzo Moretti felt like standing next to a high-voltage fence during a rainstorm. The air around him crackled with invisible violence. She retreated to the service station, her heart hammering against her ribs. She needed this job. The tips were cash untraceable and astronomical. One night here paid her rent for a month. It was the only way she could save enough to disappear for good. She just needed 2 more months. Just 2 more months of being invisible. But fate, as Emily knew too well, had a cruel sense of humor. It was 100 a.m. when the club's music shifted from lo-fi jazz to a deeper thumping bass. The room was filling up with the midnight crowd, high-end escorts, corrupt politicians, and the younger generation of mobsters looking to flash their wealth. Emily was clearing a table near the back when she felt the vibration in her apron pocket. Her burner phone. She froze. No one had this number. No one except Nonna. And Nonna knew never to call unless it was a matter of life or death. The rule was strictly text, and even then only in code. Emily looked around. Gary was yelling at a bartender. The security guards were distracted by a minor scuffle at the door involving a B-list celebrity. She slipped into the shadow of a large decorative pillar near the VIP section. It wasn't the break room, but it was dark enough. She pulled the phone out. Incoming call unknown. Her thumb hovered over the decline button, but a cold dread pooled in her stomach. If Nonna was calling from a blocked number, they had found her. Or worse, Nonna was hurt. Emily pressed answer and lifted the phone to her ear, shielding her mouth with her hand. "Pronto," she whispered. The voice on the other end was frantic fast, and speaking in the old tongue, the dialect of Corleone, a village deep in the Sicilian hills. It was a language of shepherds and soldiers, thick with slang and archaic words that modern Italians didn't use. "Emily, listen to me. They came to the house. The windows are broken. I'm at the neighbors. You need to run. They know you are in New York." Emily's blood turned to ice. She forgot where she was. She forgot the rules. She forgot the ghost she was supposed to be. The panic seized her throat, and she slipped. "Calmati, nonna," Emily hissed into the phone, her voice rising slightly sharp and authoritative. "Non ti muovere. Chiuditi dentro. Mando qualcuno. Non parlare con la polizia. Capisti, muto come un pesce." "Calm down, grandma. Don't move. Lock yourself inside. I'm sending someone. Don't talk to the police. Understood, mute like a fish." It was the accent. It wasn't the polite Italian taught in universities. It was the guttural, clipped cadence of a woman born into the life. It was the specific dialect of the western mountains of Sicily. She hung up her chest, heaving. She needed to leave. Right now. She turned around, ready to bolt for the kitchen exit, and she ran straight into a wall of midnight blue wool. Emily bounced off the hard chest and stumbled back, nearly dropping her phone. A hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. The grip was iron immovable. She looked up, gasping. Lorenzo Moretti was standing there. He wasn't looking at the air conditioner anymore. He was looking at her, and for the first time all night, he looked interested. The lounge, which had been buzzing with conversation, seemed to dim into the background. Lorenzo stood just outside the VIP rope, effectively blocking her path. He was taller up close, towering over her 5'5" frame. He smelled of sandalwood, expensive tobacco, and something metallic. He didn't let go of her wrist. "Let me go," Emily said, her voice trembling, reverting instantly to English. "I have to get back to work. I'm sorry, sir." Lorenzo tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. He was studying her face as if it were an encrypted map he had just found. "You're not from Queens," he said. It wasn't a question. Emily's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. I don't know what you mean. Please, Mr. Moretti. I need to—" "That dialect." He interrupted, his voice low, intimate, and terrifying. "I haven't heard that since I was a boy visiting my grandfather in Palermo. Corleonese. Old school. Very specific." He stepped closer, invading her personal space. The heat radiating off him was intense. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I'm just a waitress," Emily lied, trying to twist her wrist free. "My grandmother is sick. I was speaking to her. She's old-fashioned." "Old-fashioned?" Lorenzo scoffed a dry, humorless sound. "You told her to stay muto, come un pesce, mute like a fish. That is not how a granddaughter talks to a sick woman. That is how a soldier gives orders." The color drained from Emily's face. She had slipped up. The fear for her grandmother had overridden her training. "You're hurting me," she said, trying to summon the indignation of a regular civilian. Lorenzo's grip loosened slightly, but he didn't release her. His thumb brushed over the pulse point on her inner wrist. It was racing. "You're scared," he observed, "but not of me. You were scared on the phone." "I have a family emergency. Please." Lorenzo stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. He was dissecting her. He looked at her hands, her posture, the way her eyes constantly flicked to the exit. He saw the intelligence there, the sharpness that the waitress uniform had failed to hide. Then he smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Gary," Lorenzo called out, not raising his voice yet. The sound cut through the noise of the club instantly. The floor manager materialized out of the gloom, sweating profusely. "Yes, Mr. Moretti. Is everything all right? Is the girl bothering you?" "I can fire her right now, I swear." "No," Lorenzo said, his eyes never leaving Emily's face. "She's not bothering me. In fact, she's just been promoted." Emily froze. "What? I need a translator," Lorenzo said smoothly. "For a private meeting, tonight. My usual translator is unavailable. And this one," he lifted Emily's hand slightly, "speaks the exact dialect I need." "I can't," Emily blurted out. "I have to go. My shift is over." "Your shift is over when I say it is," Lorenzo said. The playfulness vanished. The wolf was back. "And if you walk out that door, whoever called you, whoever is in danger, I can promise you the police won't get to them fast enough, but my people can." It was a threat wrapped in an offer. He knew. He didn't know who she was, but he knew she was in trouble, and he knew he could use it as leverage. Emily looked at the exit. It was 20 feet away. She could run. But Lorenzo Moretti controlled the unions, the docks, and half the police force. If she ran, she'd be hunted. If she stayed, she might be able to bargain. "My grandmother," Emily whispered. "She's in danger. In Sicily." Lorenzo nodded slowly. He pulled a sleek black smartphone from his pocket and tapped a few buttons. He held it to his ear. "Alessio," he said into the phone. "I have an address in Corleone I need you to secure, immediately. Yes. Send the team from Palermo. No, keep her safe. If a hair on her head is touched, you answer to me." He hung up and looked back at Emily. "Done. My men will be there in 20 minutes. Faster than the carabinieri." Emily felt her knees go weak. She didn't know whether to thank him or vomit. He had just saved her grandmother, but in doing so he had bought her. "Now," Lorenzo said, releasing her wrist and offering her his arm like a gentleman courting a debutante at a ball. "Come with me. We have business to discuss." Emily hesitated. She looked at his arm clad in the expensive wool and then up at his face. The predator was waiting. "Don't let her leave," he said to the large bodyguard standing by the door, just loud enough for her to hear. Emily took a breath, steeled her nerves, and placed her hand on his arm. The muscle beneath the suit was hard as rock. "Good girl," Lorenzo murmured. He led her not toward the exit, but deeper into the club, toward a steel door that required a biometric scan. As the door hissed open, revealing a private elevator, Emily realized she wasn't just walking into a meeting. She was walking back into the life she had spent 6 years running from. And Lorenzo Moretti, the Wolf of New York, had just caught the scent of prey. The elevator ride was silent, a vertical ascent that felt more like a descent into hell. The walls were mirrored, forcing Emily to look at herself standing next to Lorenzo. He didn't look at her reflection. He watched the floor numbers tick upward, his jaw set in a line of granite. When the doors slid open, they didn't reveal an office. They revealed a penthouse that spanned the entire top floor of the building, a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the Hudson River. It was beautiful cold and entirely devoid of warmth. It was a coup of gold. "Sit," Lorenzo commanded, gesturing to a leather armchair that looked like it cost more than her grandmother's house. Emily sat, keeping her spine straight, her knees together. She refused to cower. Lorenzo walked to a bar cart made of dark walnut. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He walked over and held one out to her. "I don't drink on the job," Emily said, her voice steady, despite the trembling in her hands. "You're not a waitress anymore, Emily, or whatever your real name is." Lorenzo placed the glass on the table beside her with a sharp clink. He took a sip of his own, his eyes never leaving hers. "My men in Sicily called. They secured your grandmother. She's safe. They found 2 men trying to force the back door. They've been dealt with." Emily let out a breath that sounded like a sob. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Lorenzo said, pacing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights framed his silhouette, making him look larger than life. "Because now comes the payment." He stopped pacing and turned to her. "My security team ran a background check on Emily Russo while we were in the elevator. It's very good. Birth certificate, social security, high school transcripts from Queens. It's almost perfect." He leaned in, bracing his hands on the arms of her chair, trapping her. "But it's too clean," he whispered. "No parking tickets, no library fines, no ex-boyfriends posting angry comments on social media. You don't exist, Emily. You're a ghost." Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked him in the eye. "People reinvent themselves in New York every day, Mr. Moretti." "Not like this," he countered. "And they certainly don't speak the dialect of the Santa Maria clan." The name hit her like a physical blow. Santa Maria, the family her father had led, the family that had been wiped out in a bloody coup 5 years ago. She had been 19, hidden in a cellar while the house burned above her. She was supposed to be dead. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied. Lorenzo studied her face, searching for a crack. He didn't find one, which seemed to intrigue him even more. He straightened up and walked to a desk, picking up a digital recorder. "I have a meeting tomorrow night," he said, changing the subject abruptly, "with a man named Salvatore Gravano. Do you know him?" Emily's blood ran cold. Salvatore Gravano. The man who had given the order to burn her house. The man who killed her father. She forced her face to remain a mask of confusion. "I don't follow mob politics," she said. "He's from the old country," Lorenzo said, pressing a button on the recorder. "He claims he wants peace. He claims he wants to unite the shipping lanes. But I recorded a call between him and his underboss yesterday." Static filled the room, followed by a voice that sounded like grinding stones. It was Salvatore. The voice spoke in that same jagged mountain dialect. "The wolf thinks he is a king. When he comes to the warehouse, we will show him that wolves can be skinned. Have the boys ready in the rafters. When I say the word Prosecco, turn the room into a slaughterhouse." Lorenzo clicked the recorder off. The silence that followed was deafening. "My translator is a university graduate from Milan," Lorenzo said dryly. "He told me they were discussing wine shipments. He missed the idiom. He missed the tone." Lorenzo looked at Emily. "Translate it for me." Emily swallowed hard. If she translated it, she admitted she knew the code. If she didn't, Lorenzo would walk into a trap and die. And if Lorenzo died, the protection on her grandmother would vanish. Salvatore would finish the job he started 5 years ago. She had no choice. "He's not talking about wine," Emily said, her voice dropping to a hush. He said, "When he says the word Prosecco, his men in the rafters will open fire. It's an ambush, a kill box." Lorenzo didn't look surprised. He looked vindicated. "I suspected as much," he murmured. "Salvatore is a snake, but I needed to be sure." He walked back to her, his expression unreadable. "You just saved my life, Emily." "Does that mean I can go?" she asked, hope rising in her chest. "Go." Lorenzo laughed darkly. "Absolutely not. You're the only person in this city who can understand what they're saying when they think I'm not listening. You're not leaving. You're coming with me." "To the meeting?" Emily stood up, panic flaring. "No, I can't. If Salvatore sees me—" "If he sees you, what?" Lorenzo asked sharply. "Will he recognize the waitress?" Emily froze. She couldn't tell him. She couldn't tell him she was the lost princess of a dead kingdom. "He's dangerous," she said weakly. "So am I," Lorenzo said. He reached out and touched her chin, tilting her face up. His thumb grazed her lower lip, a touch that was shockingly gentle for a man of such violence. "You belong to me now, Emily. Until this war is over, you are under my protection. And in exchange, you are my ears." He turned to a closet and pulled out a garment bag. "Put this on," he ordered. "We leave in an hour. If you try to run, I pull the security detail from your grandmother's house. Do we understand each other?" Emily looked at the dress, then at the man who held her life in his hands. She hated him. She hated how trapped she was. But beneath the hate, there was a spark of something else. Adrenaline fear and a magnetic pull she couldn't name. "Yes," she whispered. "We understand each other." The dress was black, sleek, and cost more than Emily's entire life savings. It was a weapon of distraction cut high on the thigh and low in the back. Lorenzo had provided diamond earrings and stiletto heels that clicked ominously on the concrete floor of the warehouse. They were in the Bronx now, in a derelict industrial park that smelled of rust and the brackish river water. The meeting was set in an old textile factory, a neutral ground, theoretically. Lorenzo walked beside her, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. He wore a heavy wool coat over his suit, concealing the bulge of a shoulder holster. He looked calm, almost bored, but Emily could feel the tension radiating off him like heat from a furnace. "Remember," Lorenzo murmured as they approached the heavy steel doors, "you are my mistress. You are bored. You speak only English, but you listen to everything." "I know the drill," Emily muttered. "Good." The doors opened. The warehouse was cavernous, lit by hanging industrial lights that cast long, jagged shadows. In the center of the room sat a round table covered in a white cloth, a civilized island in a sea of decay. Salvatore Gravano sat at the head of the table. He was older than Emily remembered. His hair was white, his face a map of deep crevices and scars, but his eyes were the same black, beady void of humanity. Flanking him were 4 men, their hands hovering near their waistbands. Emily's heart stopped. She felt a wave of nausea. This was the man who had laughed while her home burned. She lowered her eyes, letting her hair fall forward to obscure her face. She prayed he wouldn't recognize the 19-year-old girl in the 24-year-old woman. "Lorenzo!" Salvatore boomed, standing up and spreading his arms wide. "Il lupo, you honor us." "Salvatore!" Lorenzo nodded, not offering his hand. He pulled out a chair for Emily. "This is my companion, Sophia." Salvatore's eyes raked over Emily, lascivious and gross. He didn't recognize her. To him, she was just another expensive accessory on the arm of a powerful man. "Bella," Salvatore grunted. "Sit, drink." The meeting began. It was a dance of lies. Lorenzo spoke of territory, of percentages of union dues. Salvatore nodded, smiled, and agreed to everything. It was going too smoothly. Emily sat silently sipping water, her ears straining. Salvatore turned to one of his men, a thug with a scar across his nose, and asked for a cigarette. But he didn't just ask. He spoke in the dialect fast and mumbled. "Is the back door blocked? I don't want him running like a rabbit." The thug nodded imperceptibly. "Blocked. Chains and padlock." Emily's hand tightened on her glass. They were trapped. Lorenzo continued talking, seemingly oblivious. "I need assurance, Salvatore. The Newark ports are my territory. Your men have been encroaching." "A misunderstanding, Lorenzo." Salvatore waved a hand. "We are all friends here. We are family. Why let money divide us?" He looked at the waiter, one of his own men, and signaled. "Bring the wine," Salvatore said in English. Then he switched to the dialect, speaking to the waiter. "Bring the bottle. The one we prepared. The Prosecco." The code word. Emily's eyes darted up. She saw movement in the catwalks above, shadows detaching themselves from the darkness, barrels of rifles glinting in the dim light. Lorenzo was reaching for his glass. He was relaxed. He didn't see the shooters above. Salvatore smiled, lifting his own glass. "To peace," he said in English. "And to Prosecco." Time seemed to slow down. The waiter was uncorking the bottle. The men in the rafters were taking aim. Emily didn't think. She reacted. The instinct of a survivor kicked in. She stood up abruptly, knocking her heavy chair backward with a loud crash. "No," she screamed, not in English, but in the raw, guttural Sicilian of her childhood. "You," È una trappola. Down. It's a trap. In the same motion, she grabbed the heavy glass water pitcher from the table and smashed it into the face of the man, standing closest to Lorenzo. The room exploded. Lorenzo didn't hesitate. At the sound of her voice, he didn't look at her. He dropped. He flipped the heavy table over, dragging Emily down with him, just as bullets chewed up the concrete where they had been standing. Wood splintered. Glass shattered. The roar of automatic gunfire filled the cavernous space. "Stay down!" Lorenzo roared, pulling his gun. He fired blindly over the edge of the overturned table. "They're above us!" Emily yelled, pointing to the rafters. "And the back door is chained!" Lorenzo looked at her, his eyes wide with shock and adrenaline. "You speak the language," he yelled over the gunfire, "and you throw a pitcher like a riot cop." "Focus!" she screamed back. Lorenzo's men, who had been waiting outside, breached the front doors. The warehouse turned into a war zone. Salvatore had overturned his own table and was retreating behind a stack of crates. He was screaming orders, furious that his ambush had failed. "Kill the girl!" Salvatore shrieked in the dialect. "She's the one. She's the Russo girl. I recognize the voice. Kill the witch." Emily froze. He knew. Lorenzo heard it. He grabbed Emily's arm, pulling her closer as a bullet sparked off the floor inches from her foot. "What did he say?" Lorenzo demanded, firing 2 shots that dropped a man rushing them. "What did he call you?" Emily looked at Lorenzo, her eyes filled with tears and defiance. There was no point in lying now. "He called me a Russo," she shouted. "He knows who I am." Lorenzo stared at her for a split second, the realization dawning on him. The missing background, the dialect, the hatred in her eyes. "We'll discuss that later," Lorenzo growled. "Right now, we survive." He grabbed a flashbang grenade from his coat pocket. He had come prepared for war, despite his calm demeanor, and pulled the pin. "Cover your ears," he yelled. He tossed the grenade over the table. Boom! A blinding white light and a concussive blast shook the room. The shooting stopped for a heartbeat as men screamed, blinded. "Run!" Lorenzo commanded. He grabbed her hand, and they sprinted not for the chained back door, but for a side office window. Lorenzo shattered the glass with the butt of his gun and vaulted through, pulling Emily after him. They landed on the wet asphalt of the alleyway, gasping for air. Rain was falling now, mixing with the blood and sweat on their skin. Lorenzo didn't stop. He dragged her toward his armored SUV, waiting around the corner. He shoved her into the back seat and climbed in after her. "Drive!" he screamed to the driver. "Go!" As the car screeched away, leaving the chaos behind, Lorenzo turned to Emily. His chest was heaving. He had a cut on his cheekbone, bleeding sluggishly. He looked at her with a mixture of fury and awe. "A Russo," he whispered, wiping the blood from his face. "The daughter of Giacomo Russo, the ghost of the 5 families." Emily slumped back against the leather seat, the adrenaline crashing. She began to shake. "He's going to come for me. He knows I'm alive." Lorenzo reached out. He didn't grab her wrist this time. He took her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. His grip was tight, possessive, and terrifyingly reassuring. "Let him come," Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to that lethal whisper. "You are not just a waitress anymore, Emily. And you are not just a Russo." He looked deep into her eyes, the predator recognizing his mate. "You are mine," he said, "and nobody touches what is mine." The safe house wasn't a cabin in the woods. It was a fortress of concrete and glass built into a cliffside in the Palisades overlooking the Hudson River from the Jersey side. The rain was lashing against the massive windows, turning the world outside into a blur of charcoal and grey. Inside, the silence was heavy, broken only by the crackle of a fire Lorenzo had lit and the hum of the high-tech security system. Lorenzo sat on the edge of a velvet sofa, his shirt stripped off, revealing a torso that looked like it had been chiseled from marble and scarred by a life of violence. The cut on his cheek was shallow, but a graze on his ribs from a ricocheted bullet was angry and purple. Emily stood by the sink in the open-concept kitchen, her hands trembling as she wrung out a cloth in hot water. She had discarded the heels and the diamond earrings. Now, barefoot in the ruined black dress, she felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with skin. She walked over to him. "Let me clean that." Lorenzo didn't look up. He stared at the fire. "I have doctors on payroll, Emily. I don't need a waitress to patch me up." "I'm not a waitress," she snapped, her fear transmuting into anger. "And you know it." She pressed the hot cloth to his ribs. He hissed, his muscles contracting under her fingers, but he didn't pull away. "No," Lorenzo said, his voice rough. He looked up, catching her wrist. His eyes were dark voids. "You're a Russo, the daughter of Giacomo Russo, the man who tried to put my father in prison 20 years ago, the man who refused to run drugs." "The man who was murdered for it," Emily whispered, yanking her hand back but staying close. "Salvatore didn't just kill him because of business. He killed him because my father had proof of the Commission's involvement in human trafficking. He was going to expose them all." Lorenzo studied her face, searching for the truth. "The night of the fire, everyone died. The papers said Giacomo, his wife, and his teenage daughter. 3 bodies found." "They found the maid," Emily said, her voice cracking. "She was sleeping in my room. I was sneaking out to meet a boy. Stupid. A stupid teenage reason that saved my life." Tears welled in her eyes, hot and fast. "When I came back, the house was an inferno. I saw Salvatore's men leaving. I ran. I've been running for 5 years. Lorenzo stood up, ignoring the pain in his ribs. He towered over her, the firelight casting dancing shadows across his bare chest. The intensity in the room shifted. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was a volatile mix of history, grief, and undeniable attraction. "You hid in plain sight," Lorenzo murmured. "In my club, serving drinks to the men who would have killed you for a bounty." "I needed money to get my grandmother out," she said. "I didn't know you were him. I didn't know Il Lupo was different from the rest of them." "I am not different," Lorenzo said, stepping closer, crowding her against the sofa. "I am worse. Salvatore is a butcher. I am a surgeon. I kill with precision. I run this city because I am ruthless." "You saved me tonight," Emily challenged, looking up at him, refusing to blink. "A ruthless man would have left me in that warehouse." "I don't discard things that are valuable," he said softly. He reached out his hand, cupping the back of her neck. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "And you, Emily Russo, are the most valuable thing I have ever found." The air between them crackled. The adrenaline of the shootout hadn't faded. It had just changed form. "You said I was yours," Emily whispered, her breath hitching. "I meant it." Lorenzo lowered his head and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was possessive, demanding a claiming of territory. It tasted of scotch and danger. Emily froze for a heartbeat, then melted. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, needing the anchor of his strength. For 5 years, she had been a ghost. In his arms, she felt violently, terrifyingly alive. He lifted her easily, carrying her toward the bedroom as the storm raged outside. But even as the heat consumed them, a cold thought lingered in the back of Emily's mind. Salvatore knew she was alive. The war had just begun, and sleeping with the wolf didn't mean she was safe. It just meant she was in the center of the pack. Morning came with a blinding grey light. Emily woke up alone in the massive bed. The sheets smelled of sandalwood and musk. For a second, she thought it was a dream, but the soreness in her muscles and the bruise on her arm from the warehouse floor brought reality crashing back. She found Lorenzo in the living room, fully dressed in a fresh suit, talking on a secure satellite phone. He looked immaculate, as if the night before hadn't happened. The wolf was back in his armor. He hung up as she entered. His expression was grim. "Coffee," he said, pointing to a silver pot on the table. "No good morning, no kiss. Just business." Emily poured a cup, wrapping her hands around the ceramic for warmth. "What's the damage?" "Salvatore has gone to ground," Lorenzo said, pacing. "But that's not the problem. The problem is how he knew." "The meeting was set for 9 p.m., Emily said. "We arrived at 9:05. The ambush was ready." "Exactly." Lorenzo turned to her. "He didn't just guess. He knew the location. He knew the time. He knew I was bringing a guest. Only 3 people knew those details." Emily's stomach tightened. "Who?" "Me. You." Lorenzo paused, his jaw tightening. "And Stefano." Emily gasped. "Your consigliere." "The old man. He looked at you like a son." "Stefano has been with my family since before I was born," Lorenzo said, his voice devoid of emotion, though his eyes betrayed a deep, burning fury. "He taught me how to shoot. He taught me how to tie a tie. He is the only one who manages my schedule." "Maybe his phone was hacked," Emily suggested, trying to find an alternative. "Stefano doesn't use smartphones for business. He uses couriers and burners." "No." Lorenzo walked to the window, looking out at the foggy river. "He sold me out. Salvatore must have offered him something he couldn't refuse. Maybe safety. Maybe my chair." "What are you going to do?" Lorenzo turned back to her. The look in his eyes made her shiver. It was pure, distilled violence. "I'm going to find out why," he said, "and then I'm going to make an example of him. But I can't just walk up to him. If he's working with Salvatore, he'll have protection. He'll be expecting me to come in swinging." "So don't," Emily said, her mind racing. The tactical part of her brain, the part that had kept her hidden for years, kicked in. "He knows you survived the warehouse, but he doesn't know I survived. He thinks I'm just some random mistress." Lorenzo narrowed his eyes. "What are you thinking? Use me," Emily said. "Stefano doesn't know I speak Italian. He doesn't know I'm a Russo. To him, I'm just Sophia, the scared girl from the club." She walked over to the table and picked up Lorenzo's burner phone. "Call him," she said. "Tell him I'm hysterical. Tell him I'm threatening to go to the police because of the shooting. Tell him you need him to come here alone to handle me because you can't deal with a crying woman." Lorenzo stared at her, impressed. "He'll come to silence you." "Exactly," Emily said. "He'll come to kill a loose end, and when he walks through that door, he won't be expecting a wolf. He'll be expecting a sheep." Lorenzo hesitated. "It's dangerous. If he senses a trap." "He won't," Emily said firmly, "because men like Stefano and Salvatore, They underestimate women. They don't see us. They just see collateral damage. Lorenzo nodded slowly. He dialed the number. Stefano, Lorenzo said into the phone, his voice sounding convincingly stressed. It's a mess. The girl, Sofia, she's losing it. She's screaming about the cops. She wants to call the feds. I can't think straight. I need you to come to the Palisades house. Fix this, please. He listened for a moment, then hung up. He's coming, Lorenzo said. He said he'll bring a sedative. He's coming to kill you, Emily. Let him try, she said. 2 hours later, a black sedan crunched up the gravel driveway. Emily sat on the sofa clutching a pillow. Her hair messed up. Mascara smeared under her eyes to look like she had been crying for hours. Lorenzo was nowhere to be seen. The door opened. Stefano walked in. He wore a long trench coat and carried a leather doctor's bag. His face was a mask of grandfatherly concern. Sofia, my dear, he cooed, closing the door behind him and locking it. Lorenzo told me you were upset. They shot at us, Emily screamed, pitching her voice high and shrill. I almost died. I'm going to the police. I don't care who he is. Stefano sighed, shaking his head. Now, no need for that. The police will only make it worse. He walked toward her, reaching into his bag. He pulled out a syringe. I have something to help you sleep, he said softly. Just a little pinch and all this fear will go away. He wasn't trying to hide it. He thought she was stupid. He thought she was prey. As he got within arm's reach, Emily dropped the pillow. In her right hand, hidden beneath the cushion, was a snub-nosed .38 revolver Lorenzo had given her. She leveled it at Stefano's chest. Sit down, Stefano, she said, her voice dropping the hysterical act instantly. The command was cold hard and sounded exactly like her father. Stefano froze. The syringe hovered in the air. He looked at the gun, then at her face. The confusion in his eyes was delicious. Who are you? He whispered. I'm the ghost you failed to burn, she said in perfect Sicilian dialect. Stefano's eyes widened. Russo. Drop the needle. Stefano dropped it. He took a step back, his hand inching toward his coat pocket. Don't! Lorenzo's voice boomed from the shadows of the hallway. Stefano spun around. Lorenzo stepped into the light, holding a semi-automatic rifle. He looked at his mentor with a heartbreak that was quickly hardening into hate. Why, Stefano? Lorenzo asked. Money, power. Stefano looked between the two of them. He realized he was cornered. His shoulders slumped. Survival, Lorenzo, Stefano spat. Salvatore is too strong. He has the Russians backing him now. He promised to let the families live if we gave him the shipping routes. If we gave him you. So you sold me to a butcher, Lorenzo said. I tried to save the family, Stefano yelled. You're too young. You're too arrogant. You started a war. You can't win. I didn't start it, Lorenzo said, raising the rifle. But I'm going to finish it. Wait, Emily shouted. Lorenzo paused his finger on the trigger. We need him, Emily said, standing up, keeping her gun trained on the old man. He knows where Salvatore is hiding. He knows the plan. She looked at Stefano. Where is he, Stefano? Where is the rat hiding? Stefano sneered. He's at the docks, warehouse 42. He's moving the shipment tonight. But you'll never get close. He has an army. We don't need an army, Lorenzo said. We have something better. Lorenzo fired. It wasn't a kill shot. The bullet shattered Stefano's knee. The old man screamed and collapsed to the floor. We have his phone, Lorenzo said, walking over and fishing the burner out of Stefano's pocket. and we're going to send Salvatore a message that everything went according to plan." He looked at Emily. "Get dressed," Lorenzo said. "Tonight we take back the city." The port of Newark was a graveyard of steel at night. Stacks of shipping containers formed a labyrinth of rusted corridors looming like skyscrapers in the fog. The rain had stopped, leaving the air thick with the smell of diesel saltwater and rotting fish. Lorenzo's black SUV rolled slowly past the security checkpoint. The guard expecting Stefano waved them through after seeing the familiar flash of high beams, two short, one long. It was the signal Stefano had given up after 10 minutes of persuasion back at the safe house. Inside the car, the silence was deafening. Emily checked the magazine of her pistol for the third time. She wore a dark, tactical jacket Lorenzo had given her, but underneath she was still the girl who had lost everything 5 years ago. "Stop checking it," Lorenzo said quietly, his eyes scanning the shadows of the container yard. "The gun works. The question is, do you—" Emily looked at him. "I've waited 1,825 days for this night. I work." "Good." Lorenzo parked the car behind a stack of blue Maersk containers, hidden from the direct line of sight of Warehouse 42. "Because tonight, we don't just kill a man. We kill a legend. Salvatore thinks he's untouchable. We have to show him he's just meat." They moved on foot. Lorenzo moved like water, silent and fluid. Emily followed, matching his pace. She realized then that her years of invisibility as a waitress had been training for this moment. She knew how to move without drawing eyes. She knew how to be a ghost. They reached the side entrance of the massive, corrugated metal warehouse. Through a grime-streaked window, they saw him. Salvatore Gravano stood in the center of the open floor, surrounded by his army, 20 heavily armed men. Crates were being loaded onto forklifts. He was shouting orders, looking at his watch, impatient for Stefano's arrival. "Where is the old fool?" Salvatore bellowed, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "He said the girl was handled." Lorenzo pressed his back against the wall next to the door. He held up 3 fingers. 3, 2, 1. He didn't kick the door in. He didn't throw a grenade. He simply texted the number of the foreman inside the warehouse, another detail extracted from Stefano. Inside, a phone rang. The foreman answered, looked confused, and walked toward the side door to open it. As the door cracked open, Lorenzo grabbed the man, pulled him out, and silenced him with a sleeper hold before the man could draw a breath. The path was clear. Lorenzo looked at Emily. "Stay behind me." "No," Emily said, stepping past him. "He needs to see me first." Before Lorenzo could stop her, she walked into the light. The warehouse went silent. 20 pairs of eyes locked onto the woman standing alone in the doorway. She didn't look like a victim. She stood with her feet apart, her chin high, radiating a cold, terrifying fury. "Salvatore!" She screamed, her voice cutting through the hum of the forklifts. Salvatore squinted, confused. "Who is this? Where is Stefano?" "Stefano is retired," Emily said, walking forward. "And I am the one who retired him." Salvatore's face went pale. He recognized the eyes. "Russo. Giacomo Russo's daughter," she corrected. "The girl you forgot to burn." Salvatore laughed, a nervous hacking sound. "A ghost, you come here alone to die like your father." "She's not alone," a deep voice rumbled from the shadows. Lorenzo stepped out, an assault rifle in his hands, his finger resting casually on the trigger guard. "Il lupo." Salvatore sneered, though he took a step back behind his bodyguards. "2 of you, against 20. You can't win this, Lorenzo. I have the numbers. I have the commission." "You have nothing," Lorenzo said calmly. "You have traitors and mercenaries. I have a reason." "Kill them!" Salvatore screamed. kill them both." The air exploded. Lorenzo flipped a nearby table for cover, dragging Emily down as bullets chewed up the concrete floor. But they weren't just pinned down. Lorenzo had come prepared. He tapped an earpiece. "Now." Outside the sniper team, Lorenzo had assembled men loyal only to him. The old guard of the Moretti family opened fire through the skylights. Glass rained down like diamonds. Chaos erupted. Salvatore's men were dropping caught in a crossfire between the rafters and Lorenzo's position. "Move!" Lorenzo yelled to Emily. They advanced, moving from crate to crate. It was a brutal close-quarters dance. Lorenzo was a machine, his shots precise and deadly. Emily wasn't as skilled, but she was driven by pure adrenaline. She fired at anyone who tried to flank them, her aim steady. Salvatore was running. He was scrambling toward the loading dock, trying to get to a boat waiting in the harbor. "He's getting away," Emily shouted. "Go!" Lorenzo covered her. "I'll hold them off. Go get him." Emily didn't hesitate. She sprinted through the smoke and gunfire, chasing the man who had haunted her nightmares. She burst out onto the dock just as Salvatore was untying the rope of a speedboat. He looked up, fumbling for his gun, but he dropped it on the wet wood. He scrambled to pick it up. Emily kicked the gun into the water. Salvatore fell back, scrambling crab-like across the dock. "Wait. Wait. I have money. I have millions in the Cayman Islands. I can give it to you. I can give you the territory." Emily stood over him. The barrel of her revolver pointed at his forehead. The wind whipped her hair across her face. "My father didn't want your money," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "He wanted a clean life. He wanted to protect people." "Your father was a fool," Salvatore spat, "and you are just a girl." "I am a Russo," she whispered. Bang! The shot rang out, swallowed by the vastness of the ocean. Salvatore slumped back his reign of terror, ending in the dirty water of the Newark Bay. Emily stood there for a long time, the gun hanging by her side, watching the body float away. The rain started again, washing the gunpowder from her skin. She felt a hand on her shoulder. She didn't flinch. She knew the touch. Lorenzo stood beside her. His shirt was torn, blood seeping from a fresh cut on his arm, but he looked at her with a reverence she had never seen before. "It's done," he said softly. "It's done," she repeated. She felt hollowed out, empty. The rage that had fueled her for 5 years was gone, leaving a strange sonce in its wake. "What now?" she asked, looking up at him. "I don't have a job. I don't have a name. I'm technically dead." Lorenzo took the gun from her hand and tossed it into the water. He took her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "You have a name," he said firmly. "Emily Moretti." Emily's breath hitched. "Is that a proposal?" "It's a statement of fact," Lorenzo said. "You stood by me in the fire. You saved my life. You took back your legacy. There is no one else. There never will be anyone else." He pulled her close, kissing her deeply against the backdrop of the stormy sea and the distant sirens of approaching police cars. "We have to leave," Lorenzo murmured against her lips. "Before the cops get here. We have a city to rebuild." "And the rule?" Emily asked, a small smile playing on her lips. "The one you told the guard at the club." Lorenzo smiled, the first genuine smile she had ever seen him wear. "Don't let her leave," he quoted himself, "and I never plan to." They turned and walked back toward the shadows, leaving the wreckage behind. The waitress was gone. The victim was gone. In their place walked a queen hand in hand with the wolf, ready to rule the kingdom they had conquered together. What a ride, from a humble waitress hiding in the shadows to a Mafia queen taking her revenge. Emily's journey proves that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one nobody notices. This story wasn't just about crime. It was about identity, loyalty, and finding love in the most hopeless of places. Lorenzo and Emily are the ultimate power couple, forged in fire and sealed in blood. I hope you enjoyed this dramatic saga of She Answered a Call in Italian in Front of Mafia Boss. Now I want to hear from you. Did you suspect Stefano was the traitor, or did that catch you off guard? And would you have pulled the trigger on Salvatore, or let the law handle it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. Share this video with your friends who love a good romance thriller. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next part of our storytelling journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.